There's been a change to the running order today because of the travel difficulties which our second witness due to be heard had. He's here. You will hear from him, but after our next witnesses, who are Mr. and Mrs. Nevin, who wish to be known as?
Sean and Eleanor.
Sean and Eleanor. Please. And these, I think, are your sons, are they?
Yeah.
Please state your full name.
Sean Philip Nevin.
Take the book in your raised hand and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Please state your full name
Eleanor Nevin.
and take the book in your raised hand and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the
and
truth.
nothing but the truth.
I'm going to try and direct my questions to one of you, but I know that you'll also chip in and add to each other's answers, and that's absolutely fine. Sean, you have mild haemophilia A.
Correct.
Can you tell us how that came to be diagnosed?
Quite a long, convoluted story. There was a history of haemophilia on my mother's side. My great-uncles had haemophilia. My mother noticed, I've got an older brother, 5 years older, he was having a few bleeds problems. And I also was having a few bleeding problems, muscle bleeds, etc. I kept going back and forth to the doctors, and the doctors kept sending us up to Southport Hospital, which is a local hospital. Do blood tests, come back, nothing, fine, everything's fine. This went on, till I was age 10. And then my uncle had a job at the Royal, and he got in touch with the haematology team there because he was also worried about his family. So we all went in as a joint venture for a testing, and that's where, so at the age of 10, I was diagnosed with haemophilia, mild haemophilia.
And it's mild, so
Yep.
how often as a youngster did you require treatment?
Very few and far between. I could have carried on without treatment probably and just managed muscle bleeds, etc., the way I had done for the previous 10 years. But obviously, if someone gives you a solution, you take it. So if you injure yourself, and it normally was, very rarely had a spontaneous bleed. It was normally, I had to actually have a physical injury. If I had one, then that's when I would go seek medical assistance.
On the 25th of March 1980, you had a thigh bleed.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think it come about probably playing football. Taking a knock, you don't think any more about it because sometimes you take a knock, nothing happens. Sometimes you take a knock, something does.
And this time you went into the hospital.
That's right, yeah.
And when you prepared your witness statement, you thought at that point you'd been treated by Dr. Bolton, but we now know that he had left the hospital by then, so it was somebody else.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, there is a specific note in your records we're going to look at, written by an unknown doctor. Could we have document 1425003, please, Paul? And it's the record in the middle. And it records that you've had a bleed in your left thigh, and it then says, in the last 3 lines, to avoid blood products, factor 8 too low for DDAVP, give Tubigrip and rest in bed for 3 days. You've drawn that record to our attention because you feel it's significant. Why do you say that's significant?
I wouldn't understand why if there was a perfectly safe, viable treatment why you let and I was a child at the, 11-year-old child with an injury in pain, why you just say, oh, it'll be all right, just tube grip and rest. If you had a factor product or a cryo or whatever to assist, you wouldn't send someone home. You treat them.
And in your statement, you've drawn the inference that the doctors at that stage perhaps knew something of that there were risks involved in factor 8.
Yeah.
Can we also then have 1425004? And it's the 3 entries in the middle of the page, the 19th of February 1982. Is this the first time you received factor 8?
Yeah.
And why did you receive it on these 3 dates?
These 3 dates were sold to us as, well, after a conversation. It was, everybody was switching over to factor 8. This was to be a training session, so I knew how to inject properly. And that's why the days, a few days apart, and then. But there was no injury. It's not. I hadn't attended the hospital with a problem. This was purely sold as everybody's switching over to factor 8. What a marvellous product. You can use it at home. You can take some home, but you need to be trained.
And so you were given factor 8 on 3 occasions simply to train you how to give it to yourself.
Correct.
When you had that training, were you warned of any risks involved in receiving it?
None whatsoever, no.
And if we can have document 1425002, please. And the second page of the main document. This is a leaflet that you've since been made aware of that was with the factor 8 products, and you've highlighted particularly, Paul, if we can have the warning part 2. All donations of blood from which plasma is derived for the preparation of factor 8 are, I'm afraid, let me just pull my copy up, which I can read rather more easily. Are screened for the, I didn't say the wrong thing, are screened for the presence of HbA by radioimmunoassay or reverse passive hemoglobination, and in addition each batch of factor 8 concentrate is tested by radioimmunoassay. And this is the important part. Nevertheless, the most sensitive tests cannot eliminate the possibility that the fraction may be infective, therefore the risk of transmitting hepatitis cannot be disregarded. Were you or your parents ever shown this leaflet or anything similar?
No.
How else do you think you should have been trained to use the factor 8?
Bearing in mind, especially as well, because the constant talk was how expensive this treatment was as well. They were selling it as a new treatment, new improved, very expensive. Why would you not just use saline solution? If you were treating someone for an injection, intravenous injection, the safest, well, the only way you do it, you just say, here's saline solution, just practice using that.
You've said in your statement that you're concerned about the timing of this training. Can you explain that to us?
I've followed this sort of scandal for years. Documents have appeared. They appeared on the internet, and I didn't actually receive my medical notes until I needed to about 3-4 years ago. But the timing of it coincides with a letter they call the chimpanzee letter. That letter was released somewhere along 5 weeks prior to me being administered factor 8. I don't believe, when you're dealing with people of science, that coincidences of that sort of nature happen.
You've said rather more graphically in your witness statement that you considered that you fell within the description of a PUP, a previously untreated patient.
Correct.
and that's why you were given the Factor 8 under the guise of a training exercise.
Correct.
Dr. Bolton has responded to your statement indicating that he had in fact left the Royal Liverpool Hospital in 1980, so he was not involved in this. We are awaiting a statement from Dr. McVery, and it will be published on the website when it becomes available. You had Factor products on several occasions after that training process.
Yeah.
But you think you were infected with hepatitis C during the training sessions. Why is that?
Once again, there's no physical evidence that I was infected during those training sessions. But following on once again, the database that's kept separately by a private company outside the NHS, I managed to access because I've asked permanently, when did this happen to me? And the hospital's always said, oh, we can't say exactly when it happened. The record keeping back in the 80s, it wasn't that good, wasn't that great. But the receipt of the document from the National Haemophilia Society
The database.
yeah, clearly states the armour product that I was given in the first 3 batches, American product. And
that, as far as you're aware, was the only time you were given armour product, and that's why you think that's when you were infected.
I work on the basis if you were supplying me with the product that was coming from the States, there's a pretty big assumption. It's not a leap of faith to say that that's where the virus has come from.
And although you've asked for batches to be traced to try and pin down more clearly and more precisely when you were infected, that's not been possible.
No.
May I just ask? The document which you showed us, showing that the risk of hepatitis, transmitting hepatitis can't be disregarded.
Yes.
Is that an armour leaflet or is it a BPL?
It's a BPL leaflet from April 1981.
Thank you.
So it's a little bit later, but it's what you came to find relatively recently.
Yeah.
Where did it occur? Where did you come across that?
I'd never seen that leaflet before. That was appeared in a copy of my notes when I requested my medical records from the Royal Liverpool Hospital. That was inserted. That was in there. Lots of things missing out of there, but that happened to be inserted in there.
But you feel sure that the product that you had on these 3 occasions, 2 in February, 1 in March 1982, that they were from armour?
Once again, only from documentation I've obtained myself. Not. This wasn't via the hospital. This is via the database. That quite clearly states it as armour product.
And so those documents have been given to us, and I can confirm that they were armour products in those 3 dates.
So the BPL was relating to some other dose of Factor 8, which you must have had at some stage, or just happened to be there.
Yeah.
In the early 1980s, you were having some home treatment and you kept some Factor in the fridge. When it got towards the end of the shelf life, in those early days, what happened to it?
It was like a return and exchange sort of basis. The one time I vaguely remember was we phoned up to say, the Factor's getting sort of 2 months within its shelf life, and there was a bit of a animosity argument. Well, why have you left it so late? How are we going to use this now? Bring it in straight away. So, that's what we did. It was returned, and then they exchanged it and gave us another batch.
And then in the late 80s, what happened when your Factor was getting towards the end of the shelf life?
In the late 80s, I contacted them and said, I've got some Factor here. It's due up. There's about 3-4 months left on it. So, well, why are you phoning? What do you want us to do with it? Just get rid of it. No advice on how to get rid of it. Just get rid of it.
And you said earlier that your concern about that early 1980s period was exactly what was going on when you returned the Factor. and whether it was being put back into circulation?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
You don't know, but you are concerned about
I,
what was
I
happening.
have no idea. What I am concerned about that, I'm also concerned about the fact that, other than my say-so or somebody else's say-so, that fact is being stored and kept in a good and proper manner.
Moving forwards to 1994, can you tell us how you came to find out that you had hepatitis C?
Me and Eleanor, who was she was my girlfriend at the time. We attended what was supposed to be a routine sort of check-up that they used to call us in for. So we went along to the hospital. Eleanor wanted to find out more about, because it was getting more serious, a relationship, what was happening, you know, if we got married, how it would affect her, children, etc. When we turned up at the hospital, we was sat outside, and then, as the way they used to do it, you were called into the consulting room. My consultant wasn't present.
The room was set
Oh,
up differently.
sorry.
No, prior to this, I'd come with you to another appointment, and it was quite casual with the haemophilia nurse. But on this occasion, it was like the furniture had been pushed further towards the room, so there was like a long desk with 3 people behind it, and then 2 chairs for us to sit on.
That's right, yeah.
And
then-
the consultant wasn't there, was he?
Consultant wasn't there, no. There's a registrar, another gentleman who remains unidentified, and the haemophilia nurse who we knew anyway. And they were sat on the one side of the table, and we walked in. And I think you had to pull up another chair. We sat down, and the usual questions started at the beginning. How are you? How have you been? Have you had any bleeds? All that sort of general chit-chat and, you know, general check-up, and, you know, you might want to take some bloods, etc., etc. And then, just kind of out of the blue, it was just thrown in. The gentleman, the unnamed gentleman, just kind of looked at his notes and casually said, "Oh, I see you hepatitis C positive." And then he tried to carry on some sort of conversation.
Yeah, I mean, he even laughed at one point. He put his hands behind his head and said, "Well, you want to count yourself lucky you're not HIV positive." And then on the back of that, he then said that for all he knew, he could have it, in which case he couldn't carry on practicing as a doctor. But it was very blasé. He was like, you know, how to say, hands behind his head, and very blasé about it all.
And how much were you told about the hepatitis C?
Very little, really.
Very, very, very little. I think there were, as I say, facts and figures spouted about, some of them which were probably totally irrelevant. The first one being a certain percentage of people self-clear. Well, it was blatantly obvious that had it that long, that was not going to happen. That wasn't an option. Self-clearing normally happens at the very early stages. So why that was even thrown out there, I don't know. Different facts and figures, but
We made a reference to non-A, non-B hepatitis
That's right,
at one
yeah.
point as well, and also to the fact that Sean's liver function tests had been abnormal for so many years, but he didn't elaborate on what or how. He referred to the hepatitis C as previously known as non-A, non-B hepatitis.
Had you been told over the years that your liver function tests were abnormal?
no, I didn't even know they were carrying out liver function tests.
And were you aware that you were being tested for hepatitis C at any stage?
No.
Could we have document 1425007, please? This is a blood result from 1992, and if we look in the middle section of it, we can see that, in fact, on a specimen that was received on the 1st of April 1992, that is when you tested positive for hepatitis C.
Correct.
But you weren't told until 1994.
No.
If we try and distinguish how you were told the news and the fact of the diagnosis, How do you feel about how you were told the news?
I think to have two people who were there in their early 20s looking to being there because we want, from my point of view, it was a case of, it was getting serious. We were looking at having holidays together. Should he have a bleed on holiday? What would I do about it? It was becoming a bit my responsibility with him. And I think the way for two young people sat there in a room with these people having that dropped on you and then no support, no explanation, no follow-up from it, was disgraceful. You know, nobody would do that. It was disgraceful. I'm not speaking too much on your behalf, Sean, but you can see all these years on that you can see the impact that that's had.
Because after the appointment, you simply went home.
We didn't speak. We didn't speak in the car all the way home because it was trying to. So I was 21, trying to digest exactly what had been said. Sean, goodness knows what was going through his head. I think any initial answers we had to this came from the Manor House group, which we attended. It was the only support group we could see. But again, once again, we'd go there. I can't remember how often those groups met, but we'd go, and every time we went, somebody else was either seriously ill or had died. And again, we were trying to look to the future, to get married, to have children, to start a life together. So it was a very sort of conscious decision then. Let's just try and live with it, and we stopped attending that. But actually, a lot of the information that we got initially was from there, and any support that we got was from there. And that was just a group of people who got together in very similar circumstances.
Your brother Andrew is also a mild haemophiliac.
That's right.
And he had factor VIII in about 1980 and had a severe reaction to it.
Mm-hmm.
He's provided a statement to the inquiry, and he's happy for us to discuss him as you give evidence. And he's described that after that severe reaction in 1980, he went on a treatment strike.
Yeah.
And didn't go to any appointments at the haemophilia centre.
That's right.
But after your diagnosis of hepatitis C, your mum told him to make an appointment and go along.
That's right, yeah.
What happened when Andrew went for his appointment?
Well, he was kind of forewarned. Obviously, he'd heard of my experience. And I think he walks into the same setup of room. I think there was only two doctors, or a registrar and two doctors there. And once again, they did the same sort of jig, where they say, "How are you? How's any bleeds? Any problems?" Blah blah, and dropped it in on him just as he was actually walking towards the door to leave. Said, "Oh, by the way, yeah, hepatitis C positive."
And what was Andrew's reaction?
I think the two gentlemen concerned had also started making their way out of a separate exit, which he promptly marched towards them and said, "Sit down, let's have a discussion." Probably in slightly more stronger terms, a bit more blunt than that. And he kind of held them hostage until he could try and get as much information out of them as possible. Well, they seem to be more concerned with they had ward rounds that would be waiting for them than speaking to him. Basically, he said, "Well, people in the wards aren't going anywhere, are they? I've got to go home." So.
Now, at that stage, Andrew's evidence is that he hadn't had any blood tests for at least 10 years. But despite that, they were able to tell him at that appointment he was hepatitis C positive.
That's right, yeah.
So is it your understanding as well that his belief was that he must have been infected for at least 10 years?
Yeah.
How did Andrew react to his diagnosis?
He's quite angry, obviously. We both were. It's you're merrily plodding along, and then bang, there you are. He couldn't take it in. I'd say there's a bit of denial with him as well, as there was with me. You know, you don't want to accept that this has happened to you. It's happened to you so long ago, and you've only just found out. I wouldn't say going off the rails, but it's it's a difficult thing to go through, to cope with.
That's Andrew's reaction to his diagnosis. What about your reaction?
It's just everything. It's anger, betrayal.
There's been a lot of worry as well. A lot of worry, especially bringing up the boys. You know, in my statement, I'd written a couple of things about where Sean had been ill, which we never got explanations for as to why, but he was passing blood, he had chronic stomach pains. So anything like that in future, after that event, those events, Sean automatically thought it was going to be something serious. He thought he wouldn't see the boys grow up. So it's not just a reaction to being told, is it? It's a lifelong thing to get your head around, and try as you might to put it back in your mind. It does creep forward again and take over again.
Sean, you were also tested for hepatitis A and B.
I believe so.
What was the result of that testing?
Hepatitis A was all clear. They never asked me if I wanted to be tested for it. They just did it. Same with the hepatitis B. They never asked me if I wanted to be tested for it, but they just did it. And they actually found out that I had been infected with hepatitis B, but to this day still negate to tell me. Even when I tell them, I went to a consultation 18 months ago, and I told the person with the computer screen with the facts in front of them, and they were like, "No, you've never had hepatitis B." It's there. It's in the notes. Maybe not on the computer, but it's on the paper notes.
You were tested for HTLV3 in 1986.
Yep.
And you were negative. Mm-hmm. Did you consent to that test?
No, not at that age anyway. I mean, they probably wouldn't have even asked me. But
were your parents?
I don't think they asked me. My parents. They certainly wouldn't have asked my father. They never saw my father anyway. So, but my mother, no, there was no mention of it.
As far as you're aware, she.
As far as I'm aware, she never consented. No.
And you were told that you may have been exposed to VCJD in 2001.
That's right.
What was your reaction to that?
Here we go again. When's it going to end?
You got a letter, didn't you, Sean?
Yeah.
And, it basically had the choice to find out whether he'd definitely been exposed to contaminated batches, which together we decided was there any point in knowing. So we didn't follow it up together. But since found from medical notes that he was actually exposed to the CJD virus.
And what's been the effect on you mentally, knowing about that risk?
I don't think you can measure it. It's your whole world, isn't it? I can't change it.
You said in your statement that even though you try not to think about it, it adds to the stress and mental pressure, which has been added even more to the psychological damage caused by your hepatitis C infection.
Yeah. Can you have a minute?
Can we take a break just for 5 minutes?
Yes, let's do that. So we'll take a 10-minute break. If at any time you want another break, just please let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sean, you've spoken very powerfully in your statement about survivor guilt as well, and we can see it's affected you hugely. Eleanor and Sean, have either of you ever been offered any counselling or psychological therapy?
No, nothing. As I said before, the only sort of support we got from all of this was the Manor House group. And they were doing a lot of research, which was then fed back to the group when we met. That's how we initially found out that blood had been bought from high-risk groups in America, and that was every likelihood that where the infection had got into the treatment system that Sean was in.
And what's the physical impact of the infection been? And pre-treatment, what was the physical impact?
Physically, very, very difficult for me to say because I suspect I was infected so young. You mixed fatigue, tired. You're in your teens. You're just part of growing up, and also came from a sort of background of men are men, and you're tired, so crack on, doesn't matter, crack on. It's like that very British thing when people say, how are you? Everyone always says, I'm fine. Doesn't matter the fact you might have just lost an arm or something, but I'm fine, yeah. So physically it's hard to tell because I felt like sort of in my schooling, I passed my O levels and I went on and started my A levels, but I just started to, I couldn't cope. I just started to like drift. I just thought, well, perhaps it just wasn't A levels weren't just for me, but I can't retain information like from a text and stuff like that. It's just very difficult for me, and the more I read, the more tired I get. So the simple solution was to go out and get a job.
From your diagnosis, you had a couple of appointments in 1994 until November 2015. What treatment and monitoring did you have for your hepatitis C?
None. It's non-existent. Not a scan. Nothing.
So after the initial few appointments, that was it?
That was it, yeah.
You didn't meet with hepatologists or anything to do? It was
No.
just your haematologist at the Royal?
Yeah.
No, there was nothing.
And Eleanor, what were you thinking during this period?
Anything that virus-wise, as in like colds, you had flu, didn't you? I think I probably completely overreacted to anything like that, thinking this is it, because of the lack of understanding on my part. And I think a lot of things now are hindsight as well. So Sean's always been tired, always suffered with fatigue, which obviously I worked full-time, 2 small boys at the time as we were bringing our family up. You're going to have to ask me the first question again because I know I've gone off at a tangent. So.
What you were thinking of during that period from 94-ish until 2015?
Yeah. So worry. It would be at the back of my mind and just try and carry on as normal and live our lives and bring up our family. But then it would only take something little for me to think, is this the start of it? Because we suspect that Sean had been infected possibly 12 years before he was told. The big number in my head was 25 years because for us that's what we were told was well, you're okay for 25 years, but after that you might get liver cancer, you might go into liver failure, you might get cirrhosis. So that 25 years for me was okay, as long as he's not showing any symptoms of it, and then we're okay. So we just try and get on with it and hope for the best. But then the moment something did happen that could rock the boat, that's when I'd be, this is it, this is something, this is bigger than it, So, I mean, I remember ringing a GP in the middle of the night, the on-call, it was flu. But for me, it wasn't flu, it was like, he's got a temperature, this is the start of it now.
Earlier you described it as a bit of a time bomb.
Time bomb, yeah. And as I say, I did, to an extent, still now think of those 25 years, that was those 25 years. And for us, you're talking the 13 years if he'd had it, the 12 years before he was told about it. So we had in my head, 13 years before he was going to get seriously ill.
In November 2015, you attended a haematology clinic and raised concerns about your liver condition. Why was that?
I had noticed like a pressured sensation around the area of the liver. If any, you know, if it like sort of leaned in a funny way, it just felt really uncomfortable. And obviously, I was thinking, well, hang on, something going on here.
And what happened next after that appointment?
It was arranged for a joint haematology clinic, which I attended. Straight away, they were talking about me having, you know, a scan, but they were going to do a fibre scan there and then, which I think they did. And that weighed in at somewhere around 12.1, which sort of didn't really mean much to me because no one had explained the scale to me anyway. You might as well have said it was going to be 18. You could have told me it was 6. It doesn't. If you don't know what scale you're working on, it's irrelevant. It's only after you use the magic of Google and find out where you stand with it that it makes any sense to you. But it did make sense when you start saying to you, "Oh, you're eligible for this treatment," and it was the newish Harvoni treatment combination.
And so you started the 12-week Harvoni ribavirin treatment in 2016.
Yeah, well, I wasn't really given much option about it. It was like it was a bit like when someone sells you windows, they press you, and I asked was there any side effects? No.
I was told that as well, separately
No.
to Sean. Sean had gone off for something in the hospital, and I spoke again to the nurse that was setting him up with the treatment, and she said there was no side effects, were minimal for the Harvoni and the ribavirin treatment.
Yeah, and it was a case of, oh, this drug's just been approved, and we don't know how long they're going to have funding for it, so you best getting it now, get started now, because it might not be available in a month.
So you did get going.
So I did get going.
And what was the effect of it on you?
Oh, yeah.
Physical or mental start?
Yeah.
Eleanor, why don't you tell us it from
Mental
perspective?
state's probably best else.
Well, for us, and I am very much speaking on the boys' behalf here as well, can't think of a better way of phrasing it other than like living with somebody who had permanent PMT. His moods were just like this. It was just, but anything could trigger, nothing could trigger it. So in our house, because we're busy, I work full time and the boys are at school, it's always been a big thing with me to have the family together as far as possible at tea time, just the 10 minutes together at tea time. But that was probably... Well, it was definitely horrendous during the time that Sean was on his treatment, because that's the time where things will quite literally fly. And I know Harvey has put it in his statements about the number of times walking home from school, he had that knot in his stomach, not knowing what he was coming home to, the mood in the house. Physical sides of it, I know when George has been walking with Sean and he's lost his breath, that he's been out on the sand dunes near us down at the beach, panicking in case his dad was about to collapse. That's the physical side of it. But mood side was pretty horrendous. And not even just for the 3 months that went on afterwards as well. To an extent almost where I do wonder if he's still got some of it still in his system. Or if it's just now that this is all coming to the forefront that is obviously affecting Sean as well.
You described in your statement, Eleanor, that at the time of Sean's treatment, I lost count of the times that things would fly off the table and Sean would storm off. He had no motivation for anything. His one saving grace was our young husky that needed walking. Yeah,
that was the only reason Sean will go out in the day. I mean, he didn't feel very well as well, physically, which I'm sure you'll explain that in a moment, but that was the only thing, because he had to have got this husky and she'd drive him mad if she didn't get her exercise and I was out at work, so yeah, that was the only thing that made him get up and go and walk for hours. But there again, I say it was a bit of a worry because obviously there's the physical side as well. You want to explain your physical side?
Do you want to add anything, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, mentally for me, it's like there's like this little, like a box in the back of my mind, and it's got all this stuff in it, and it's there, but it's like a little bit of pressure. The lid's rattling a bit, and it'll only take the slightest thing for the whole box to just go, and I'll fly off.
That's what it has been. That's what it has been.
That's the only way I can describe it. And that poor dog that loves walking was my saving grace, because she was the only one that would listen to me while I ranted, walking along the beach and almost ending up in Southport. And you know, I've got arthritis in my ankle, but I'd walk through the pain because that was the only little bit of sanity I had, was walking with that dog, looking out at sea. And that was the only time mentally I switched off.
And Sean hadn't been anything like this prior to the treatment. Far from it. He's always had people in stitches, and you know, and being the
I'm a fun guy, really.
But I think in all of this, the fact that we had no warning about this, we were told that no side effects were minimal, and it's only through, once again, our own research. I know you and I sat even quite recently and went through all the side effects. The first pack of drugs that you were given there was not even an information leaflet with it. It was just the blister packs, no box, just the blister packs. So that was the ribavirin, was it?
Ribavirin was just in the blister pack, and the Harvoni came in a little white tub with just telling you how many times to take it and when.
So there was absolutely no preparation for it. We put aside January to start it, hadn't we? Which actually is probably everybody's bleakest month anyway, isn't it? It's the dark month, isn't it? Yeah, it was. It was very difficult. Very difficult.
The breathlessness. I remember mentioning it to the specialist nurse there, and I can't remember how many weeks in. It was probably 3-4 weeks in, and I mentioned about getting breathless. And when you walk in, it felt like your heart was going to jump out your chest. It was absolutely pumping, and it was basically, she kind of went, "Well, you can stop now if you want. It's up to you." Okay, right. Well, if you stopped, that was it. You didn't get a second chance to, so just bat on. So it carried on.
That treatment cleared the virus.
It did.
But you've had ongoing both physical and mental effects from that treatment. Are they much the same as on the treatment, or what's happened since?
I'm probably very
But
slightly.
your moods have calmed.
Yeah.
You still have your moments,
Yeah.
but your moods have calmed. And it is, as I said a minute ago, it's difficult to tell how much from the treatment, because from there it's gone into then obviously we'd heard that the inquiry was about to start, so you were obviously involved in following different things leading up to it, weren't you? So for something that's been tried to be shoved at the back of your mind for so long, and then suddenly it's there, and finally somebody's listening, and it's not, because at times, we've said it in the past, at times you're told this and then you just told to go and get on with it, and you get to a point where is that actually happened? Is this real? You know, because nobody's ever bringing it up again. Nobody's scanning him and making sure he's all right. So for a couple of times it's gone through my head over the years. Is this as bad as it seems? Because nobody seems to be bothered. It's never mentioned on the news. It's not. And then it's only now, obviously now it's all coming out that everybody now is aware and becoming more and more aware of the scale of it.
And since clearing the virus, have you had any liver monitoring?
No, there lies a good one, because I was actually discharged by the hepatology department in a lovely letter saying, there you go, the virus is undetectable, we're discharging you. But unfortunately for them, I think I had a scheduled appointment with haematology, Professor Toe, who all went in and said, I'm not having that. Said, as far as I'm concerned, it's your responsibility, excuse me, to carry on monitoring me. I want a fibre scan and a full scan of my liver at least once a year. Which he didn't. He just didn't argue to. He said, yes. Booked it straight away, which spun me straight back round to hepatology when they got the results of the scans, obviously, because they have to analyse them. And then you go, we're starting now to go down the route of, oh yeah, we've had a look at the scan of your liver, and you've got a bit of fatty liver there. It's quite normal in someone your age, and it's I think it's a lifestyle thing. You need to go on a diet. That's just what you want to hear after 34 years of hepatitis C, is someone saying it's your lifestyle that's damaged your liver.
And what's happened since then?
Apart from me getting angry. I've had another fibre scan. And the fibre scan at the end of treatment was, so it had gone from 12.2, so 12.1, 12.2, it had gone down to about 8.1. Well, now it's back up at sort of 10.2. But, nobody's mentioned anything about it. I only know that's the score because when she did the fibre scan, I just said, well, what's the score then? That was the operator. But no one's actually contacted me and said, by the way, Mr. Nevin, the fibre scan's going back up.
So you're not clear what the situation is?
No, not really, no. I'll probably wait for me next year's scan.
I want to move on to the impact of the hepatitis and the treatment on your working life, Sean. I don't know whether, Eleanor, whether Sean would find it easier for you to talk about it. I don't mind.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about it from there? I'll talk about it from it. Yeah, I mean...
I'll start it off. I went via the education route, and I fell out of that, and fortunately I found myself a job in a laboratory. This was for edible oil. It wasn't that far away. It was quite a good job. I was only 16 at the time, and they didn't even have my driving test. The manager used to come and pick us up and take us to work. Great, happy days. So they trained me in-house. I was there for quite a few years, and I went from just a lab tech cleaning bottles to an analyst and senior analyst. I was on good money, but it was shift work, 3 shifts. And if you compound 3 shifts with fatigue, tiredness as it is, after so many years, I'd had enough. I distinctly remember, my mum and dad, they put up with a lot. I was still living at home at the time, and I remember coming in off a night shift one morning, just waking them up and saying, I've had enough of this. I can't do this anymore. I'm going to quit. Your mother goes, sends you to bed, like. And when you wake up, she says, well, you can quit if you want, but what are you going to do for money? So.
And then subsequently, once you were diagnosed with hepatitis C, what happened in terms of your work?
There was questions relating to, working in a food manufacturing plant while I've got Hep C. It's not ideal, is it? And there was consideration of, whether I could carry on working there. Fortunately, I was allowed to. But eventually, the company was relocating because the site we were working was fairly old. And I was offered to go. I think they were going to Holland, which wasn't really an option. Take voluntary redundancy or wait and see, and it would just be redundancy in about a year's time. So I just took the voluntary redundancy there and then. And that was it.
I think Sean has said as well in his statement, and I have, is due to the tiredness. I think together we sort of opted for the route of a job that was 9 to 5, fairly local, low paid, but it meant then that he could at least have a little bit of a quality life. But 2 maternity leaves, the low pay, we ended up in dire straits financially. So it eventually came down to Sean taking a higher paid job where he had to travel for 40 minutes, leaving at 5 o'clock in the morning. But a few weeks into that, he'd come in and he'd sit down from work and fall asleep as I was talking. I'm not the most interesting person, but he would fall asleep while I was talking to him. Mid-sentence, literally mid-sentence. He was just, and then that would be it. There would be nothing else for the evening. That would just be it. And then weekends, sleeping a good 12 hours, trying to catch up. So he couldn't maintain that. We, as a couple, as a family, couldn't maintain that. It was, it put huge strain on us. So that was the last sort of full-time job that you had that way, wasn't it? But to us, it just showed that as good as Sean was at the job, there is no way he could physically and mentally do that with that pressure and that length of time in a day.
And how did those working issues impact your marriage?
We came very close to splitting up at one point, didn't we? It was just like we just weren't. I was getting resentful because I was working full time, but I felt that I was doing it on my own. It just put a massive pressure on us, didn't it?
Yeah.
Huge pressure on us.
That sort of pressure combined with financial pressure.
Yeah, there was that, which was huge.
Which is just ongoing, isn't it? Just,
You've obviously had 2 boys.
Yep.
When did you tell them about the hepatitis C?
Very recently, just before Sean started his treatment. I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but it is literally 2 years ago, I think, was it? Yeah. And it was because Sean was about to go on to the treatment in the January. We told them in the December, so we'd done everything to keep it quiet from them because it is, we've just been of the attitude, our worries are definitely not there. They shouldn't be their worries. They were kids, they were growing up. So, but because of the treatment that Sean was going on, and combined with he had been told by Professor Toe that he was eligible for the Skipton Stage 2 fund, so we sort of used that as a bit of a thing to soften the blow. They were getting older as well, so they knew that the dad was going to be going on the treatment. So we told them, I think in the December, just before he started the treatment.
And you've both described in your statement that as well as wanting to protect them from all the worry, you also wanted to protect them from the stigma associated with it. Can you tell us any more about that? Yeah,
I mean, we've heard it from other witnesses as well, haven't we, where it's the attitude of, well, we don't want our children playing with them. And I'm a teacher, primary school teacher as well, so there was that side of it. I in fact, God love them, they went to the school that I was teaching. I even taught one of them, so it's quite a community, and where we live is quite a community. So it was the lack of information that people have and awareness of it, very quick to make judgments. It's quite an affluent area as well, and you just to protect them wholly from the whole thing, the stigma side of it, as I say, is people lack of understanding and lack of, we heard this morning, didn't we, the things that poor lady went through this morning. So the children, they're innocent to it all.
Have you told many other people about your diagnosis?
Close friends, wasn't it? And
yeah,
close family.
really close friends.
A lot more recently spoken about it. Because
and what's been the impact on your parents, Sean?
My dad's not with us anymore, but he was in the Merchant Navy, my dad, so he'd be home for sort of 6 months, away 6 months, and then but he just never really accepted it.
He never spoke of it.
He just never spoke of it. And don't get me wrong, he was a great dad, but that was just a subject he could not broach. He wouldn't go near it. He'd listen to you. I could moan at him about it, but he wouldn't pass comment on it. He couldn't. I don't think he could bring himself to.
And what about your mum?
And my mother, she fought for 10 years to get a diagnosis. Imagine that, fighting for 10 years, get a diagnosis, then this happens, because she'd taken me there.
She blamed herself, and I mean, she's not. She's elderly now, and she's not in a position to say this herself. She was a very, very strong lady in her heyday. You know, her husband away at sea, 3 boys to bring up, and she was strong, and she, you know, her children were just everything. So she said to me on a lot of occasions that she thought she was doing the right thing. Once he was diagnosed with the haemophilia and then offered treatment for if you had a bleed, she just said, I thought I was doing the right thing. So she did blame herself.
You've described, Sean, in your statement that your diagnosis had a devastating effect on her.
Yeah, she, you know, she's still, that's the line now, even, still, that's it, whenever you sort of mention anything to do with it, or, you know, has she heard anything, seen anything, that's the first line she goes to, I wish I'd never bothered.
You've referred to financial difficulties, and during this time you've received stage 1 payments from Skipton and special category mechanism payments from EIBSS, but you also applied for a stage 2 payment. Can you tell us what happened to those applications?
The first application, as I think people understand, has got to be filled out by a medic of some variety, normally your specialist, which, you know, it was the same time I was talking about going on to the Harvoni treatment. Both the hepatology and the haematology were, yeah, you're definitely eligible. You're definitely, that's set, you know, set in stone. I think there's a letter in my record that even relates to it, saying Sean is definitely eligible. That's to my GP. They fill out the form, you send it away, and you think, well, that's it, yeah, it's done and dusted, until you get the letter back from the Skipton saying, no, there's not enough evidence. Well, how much evidence do you want? My notes state I'm cirrhotic. They're telling me cirrhotic. I wouldn't have been eligible for the higher treatment.
So you applied a second time?
I did, in noting all those things. And having endured, because I went back to the hospital, obviously, and said, you need to help me out with this. You know, this needs sorting out. You told me I was getting this money. I borrowed money off the back of that. Because that's what you do. When you think you're getting something. And then it was... so I went back to them and tried to jump through all the hoops. Took the further tests, the endoscopy, etc., etc. And the tone changed from the hospital. It was, oh no, I don't think you are eligible. Professor Toe, I didn't speak to him about it, but a colleague of his came in, spoke to her. She said, I've worked on McFarlane, all this. No, you're definitely not ill enough to get it. Don't know why anyone told you were.
You did supply you applied a second time.
I did, I put an appeal in, yeah.
And it was rejected.
It was, yeah.
On the basis that you didn't meet the criteria.
Correct.
But you're still unclear about exactly what the criteria are.
Yeah, it's very easy to say you don't meet a criteria that no one can see.
And the other thing, and Sean had tried to contact them several times to discuss what the criteria, but it was always, the conversation was palmed off.
Yeah.
They're not there, they're on the lunch, and then people wouldn't get back to speak to him. So.
And this, this was in the, this is from what I can see, what I would class as the death throes of the Skipton Fund. It was going. So I just don't think they wanted to sign it off.
And you've said in your statement that the process had no clear parameters, and you believe that the parameters should be published so that you're clearer on exactly what the eligibility criteria are.
Correct.
Those are all the questions I have for you. Is there anything else you want to say?
There is, yeah. Just refer to my ramblings. Firstly, I'd like to thank Sir Brian and all the inquiry team for the opportunity to have our experiences, shall we put them, heard. I'd also like to thank all the staff at Collins Solicitors, because I believe without their tenacity, I fear this inquiry might never have got to where it is. I'd just like to, having already seen and heard, because this has been going on a long time, some of the excuses of the scandal publicly aired by the professions. I'd just like to clarify some, what I call disseminated opinions. I'll start with the definition of an accident. And that is, it's an unfortunate incident that happens unexpectedly and unintentionally, typically resulting in damage or injury. That's the definition. Even the limited witness statements and evidence gathered to date, I think we can quite safely say, I don't think there was anything unintentional or unexpected that happened here. So I proffer that anyone that puts forward the word accident in defence of this just wasn't worthy to hold a post that they had, whether it be consultant, minister or civil servant. Next up would be the knowledge. And the classic statement, we didn't know about these viruses. And, you know, it's documented evidence in the 70s and 80s. You only have to go on Google, look at the journals. The proof was there. Academics were forewarning of problems with pool blood, hepatitis. There's only one group of people, in my opinion, who are truly unaware of the consequences of plasma products and pool products, and that was us, the patients. Any of these people who were given half of the knowledge available at the time, and I'm saying at the time, we would have declined that treatment. We didn't realise non-A, non-B, which is now Hep C, was anything other than benign. Well, if this is a true statement, well, why were these pharmaceuticals and research programs throwing money and money and money to isolate the virus, establish a test, and studying the observable recorded liver abnormalities? This is research documents that people can see. It's just a lie. It's just not true. Another classic is most haemophiliacs would have died in or before their 20s without any treatment. It's not true. I was 10 years old. I could have gone on to 30 years old, 40 years old with a bit of ice, a bag of peas. That's what I had before. I've never had, and I don't think most mild haemophiliacs will have ever had, a life-saving treatment. Certainly had a life-altering treatment, but never a life-saving one. And finally, I'll just briefly touch on this. No one wants to discuss it. So one thing that threads the scandal together, from the source of the plasma, the import and export agents, the customs, the drug agencies, the pharmaceutical companies, the governments, the ministers, the hospitals, and now us, the victims, is the money. True compensation doesn't need to be complicated. And I find people who are made to pay compensation through our authorities are making it complicated because they can. I don't want another tailored round of schemes. I'm sick of schemes. Schemes ain't going to help me. Means testing isn't going to help me. The means testing they had didn't even truly means test. They didn't measure your income to your outgoings. They just went, you were earning that much, you're not getting it. I don't want any more discrimination of virus types and manipulated virus stages. It's just tried and tested tactics, divide and conquer. We know them. And any payments that are made, if Sir Brian can get these governments to come to the table and make payments. They need to be paid to all haemophiliacs, all those affected, those that have died. That shouldn't be ignored. They don't deserve no money. It's got to go to their widow or their estate. And that includes people who are consequently infected as well via haemophiliacs. I think that's about all I need to say.
I'm just going to turn and ask Mr. Snowden, who's representing you, if there's anything further. Oh, sorry, Mr. Cummins. Apologies. Sir, do you have any further questions?
No, I don't. But thank you very much indeed, both of you, and thank you for your sons for being there to support, for the evidence which you've given so clearly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we'll take a break now before we hear our last witness of the day, Leroy Scarlett, and that'll be at 3:45.
Thank you, sir.